The morning sun cast long shadows across the farming fields of New Busan Colony when the alien ships appeared in the sky. 12 massive vessels hung like dark clouds above the settlement, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Captain Kim Dae stood on the observation deck of the colony's defense center, sipping his morning coffee as if giant alien warships were nothing more than an interesting weather pattern. His uniform bore the distinctive patch of the Honey Badger Division, a small, fierce creature with glowing red eyes and the simple words beneath it that read, "We don't give up." The communication system crackled to life with an alien voice speaking perfect, though oddly formal, human language. "Attention human settlement designated New Busan. I am Fleet Commander, Kethmar of the Veltharian Imperial Navy. You will surrender your colony and submit to Galactic Council authority within 1 standard hour. Resistance will result in total destruction of your settlement and all inhabitants." Lieutenant Park Sol rushed into the command center, his face pale with worry. He had served with many military units before joining the Honey Badgers, and he knew what 12 alien warships could do to a small farming colony. "Captain, we have 300 colonists, mostly farmers and their families. Our defensive systems consist of 2 outdated plasma cannons and a handful of mining equipment. They have enough firepower to turn this entire planet into space dust." Kim Dae nodded thoughtfully, still looking up at the alien fleet through the reinforced windows. The Veltharian ships were beautiful in their own way, sleek and deadly, with weapon ports that glowed with contained energy. He had read the intelligence reports about their technology: energy shields that could stop any human weapon, plasma cannons that could melt through steel, and armor plating that had never been penetrated by conventional forces. "Interesting," Kim Dae said, finishing his coffee. "They gave us a whole hour. Most species usually get about 10 minutes. Park Sol stared at his captain in disbelief. "Sir, with respect, I think you're missing the point. We cannot fight those ships. This is not a battle we can win." Kim Dae smiled, the same calm expression he wore whether he was discussing the weather or planning an assault on impossible odds. This was why High Command had specifically requested the Honey Badger Division for colony defense duty. Not because they were the best soldiers, but because they were the only ones who would take the job seriously when facing certain defeat. "Park Sol, in your opinion, what makes the Honey Badger Division different from every other military unit in human space?" The lieutenant thought for a moment. "We have the highest casualty rates, the lowest success rates according to traditional metrics, and we're staffed entirely by soldiers who have been declared psychologically unfit for normal military service." "Exactly. And what else? We never surrender." "Not quite right." Kim Dae walked over to the communication console and activated the response channel. "We never lose. There's a difference." He pressed the transmit button, and his voice carried across space to the waiting alien fleet with the same casual tone he might use to order lunch. "Fleet Commander Kethmar, this is Captain Kim Dae of the United Earth Forces Honey Badger Division. I have received your surrender demand and given it all the consideration it deserves. Here's my response. If you want our colony, come and take it." The silence that followed was so complete that Park Sol could hear his own heartbeat. Then, the alien commander's voice returned, carrying a note of confusion. "Human captain, perhaps you did not understand. We possess superior numbers, advanced technology, and overwhelming firepower. You cannot possibly hope to resist our forces." Kim Dae leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "Commander Kethmar, perhaps you did not understand. We are the Honey Badger Division. We have fought enemies with superior numbers, advanced technology, and overwhelming firepower before. We are still here. They are not." Throughout the colony, the distinctive alarm that signaled a Honey Badger Division call to action began to sound. It was not the urgent, panicked wail of a standard emergency alert, but a steady, almost cheerful tone that seemed to say, "Time to go to work." Sergeant Lee Nari was in the middle of teaching a basic engineering class to the colonist children when the alert sounded. She looked up at the alien ships visible through the classroom window and smiled. "Class dismissed, kids. Go find your parents and tell them Sergeant Lee says it's time to learn about advanced agriculture." The children, who had grown up on a frontier colony protected by the Honey Badger Division, nodded seriously and ran off to deliver the message. They had been through these drills before, though never with actual alien warships overhead. By advanced agriculture, Li Nari meant the careful art of turning farming supplies into military assets. The honey badgers had learned long ago that the best weapons were often the ones your enemy never expected to encounter. Corporal Choi Min was already down in the equipment storage areas, taking inventory of their available resources, mining explosives, construction vehicles, agricultural chemicals, and enough spare parts to keep everything running for months. To most military analysts, it looked like the random supplies of a small frontier colony. To a honey badger, it looked like an armory waiting to be assembled. "Captain," Park Sol said, watching the organized chaos beginning throughout the colony, "what exactly is our strategy here? How do we fight 12 warships with farming equipment?" Kim Dae pulled up a tactical display showing the positions of the alien fleet. The Veltharian ships had arranged themselves in a standard orbital bombardment pattern, designed to provide maximum coverage while protecting each vessel with overlapping fields of fire. "The Veltharians have studied us, Park Sol. They know about our weapons, our standard tactics, our military doctrine. They have prepared for everything they expect humans to do in this situation. And what do they expect? They expect us to either surrender immediately or put up a brief, hopeless resistance before being overwhelmed. They have conquered 47 different species using this same approach. Every single one of those species behaved exactly as the Veltharians predicted." Kim Dae stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling activity as his soldiers and the colonists began preparations that would have seemed completely insane to any conventional military observer. "But here's what the Veltharians don't understand about humans, and specifically about the Honey Badger Division. We don't fight to win. We fight because we don't know how to stop fighting." The communication system activated again, and Commander Kethamar's voice filled the room, now carrying a note of impatience. "Human Captain, your hour of grace is nearly concluded. Will you surrender your colony, or must we demonstrate the futility of resistance?" Kim Dae activated the response channel one final time. "Commander, I appreciate your patience, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. You seem to believe this is a negotiation. It's not. This is New Busan Colony, defended by the Honey Badger Division. If you want it, you're going to have to take it from us. And I should warn you, we're the people who looked at wolves and decided to make them into pets. We're the species that invented extreme sports because regular sports weren't dangerous enough. And we're the military unit that responds to impossible odds by getting angry about being underestimated." He paused, looking up at the alien warships hanging in the sky like mechanical vultures. "So please, Commander Kethmar, give us your best shot. We'll show you why the honey badger is the only animal on Earth that other animals are afraid to fight." The transmission ended, and the colony of New Busan prepared for war against impossible odds, defended by soldiers who had never learned the meaning of the word surrender. Above them, 12 alien warships began their descent, confident in their superior technology and overwhelming advantage. They were about to learn why that confidence was misplaced. The first wave of Veltharian dropships descended through the morning sky like metal raindrops, their engines humming with alien technology. Each ship carried 20 fully armed soldiers, equipped with energy shields, plasma weapons, and armor that could withstand most human military hardware. Commander Kethmar watched from his flagship as 40 dropships moved toward predetermined landing zones around New Busan Colony. The Veltharian battle plan was simple and had worked flawlessly across dozens of conquered worlds. Establish secure landing zones, deploy overwhelming force at strategic points, eliminate military resistance, and accept the inevitable surrender of civilian populations. The entire operation should take no more than 6 hours. What the Veltharians did not understand was that the Honey Badger Division had never read the manual on how military operations were supposed to work. Sergeant Li Nari, crouched in the colony's main storage facility, surrounded by bags of fertilizer, containers of farming chemicals, and several dozen colonists who looked nervous but determined. She had spent the past hour teaching them the basic principles of what she cheerfully called advanced agriculture. "Remember," she told the group of farmers and shopkeepers, "these aliens have studied every human weapon system. They know about our rifles, our explosives, our standard military equipment. But they have never encountered a farmer with a bad attitude and a complete understanding of agricultural chemistry." One of the colonists, an elderly man named Cho Bin who had been growing crops on New Busan for 15 years, raised his hand. "Sergeant, are you absolutely certain this will work?" Li Nari grinned. The same expression she wore when people told her something was impossible. Cho Bin, I once held off an entire pirate squadron using nothing but mining charges and a broken cargo hauler. Trust me, we are going to be fine. The first Veltharian dropship touched down in what their tactical computers identified as Landing Zone Alpha, a flat area near the colony's power station. 20 alien soldiers emerged in perfect formation, their weapons ready, their shields activated. They had been trained to expect defensive positions, fortified buildings, perhaps some scattered resistance from primitive human weapons. Instead, they found themselves standing in the middle of what appeared to be an empty field. Squad leader Vexthal activated his communication system. Landing Zone Alpha secured. No enemy contact. Beginning advance toward primary objective. His squad moved forward in textbook formation, their sensors scanning for threats, their weapons ready to engage any human forces that might appear. They had taken exactly 12 steps when the ground beneath them exploded. The blast came not from military explosives, but from a carefully arranged mixture of agricultural fertilizer and fuel that had been buried in the field the night before. The explosion was not sophisticated, not precise, and certainly not regulation military equipment. It was also completely devastating. 3 Veltharian soldiers were thrown clear of the blast zone, their armor damaged but intact. The rest of the squad found themselves scattered, confused, and under attack from directions that made no tactical sense. Lee Nari emerged from a hidden position in a nearby irrigation ditch, carrying what looked like a modified crop sprayer. She had spent the morning filling it with a mixture of industrial solvent and agricultural herbicide that would eat through most known materials. Welcome to New Busan, she called out cheerfully, and opened fire. The Veltharian soldiers tried to return fire, but their weapons had been designed to fight other soldiers, not individuals who popped out of farm equipment, attacked with improvised chemical weapons, and then disappeared back into the landscape like deadly prairie dogs. Across the colony, similar scenes were playing out as 40 Veltharian landing parties discovered that their intelligence reports had somehow missed the most important fact about human warfare. When humans were defending their homes, they stopped following the rules. Corporal Choi Min had positioned himself inside the colony's grain storage facility, which the Veltharians had identified as a low-priority target. His weapon was a mining laser that had been declared unsafe for normal use 3 years ago. It held together with maintenance tape, spare parts, and what Choi Min described as pure stubbornness. When the second wave of dropships approached his position, Choi Min simply turned the mining laser to maximum power and began cutting through their hulls while they were still in the air. The laser overheated immediately, filled the storage facility with smoke, and made a sound like a dying animal. It also brought down 4 Veltharian dropships before finally exploding in a shower of sparks. Choi Min crawled out of the wreckage, covered in soot and grinning widely. He picked up a shovel from the farming equipment and headed toward where the crashed dropships had landed. Private Kim Sun had been assigned to defend the colony's water treatment plant, which everyone agreed was probably the least important military target on the planet. She had spent her preparation time figuring out how to weaponize the facility's chemical storage tanks. When a full squad of Veltharian soldiers approached the treatment plant, they found themselves walking into a cloud of chlorine gas mixed with industrial cleaning chemicals. Their armor protected them from most environmental hazards, but it had never been tested against someone who had turned an entire water treatment facility into a chemical warfare laboratory. Kim Sun watched through the plant's observation windows as the alien soldiers stumbled around in the toxic fog, their sensors overwhelmed, their communication systems damaged by the corrosive atmosphere she had created. Should have stayed home, she muttered, and activated the facility's emergency sprinkler system, which she had loaded with a mixture of industrial acid and agricultural pest control chemicals. Back in the command center, Captain Kim Dae was monitoring the battle through communication reports from his scattered soldiers. The reports were not following any standard military format. Captain, this is Lee Nari. Landing Zone Alpha is no longer operational. Neither are most of the aliens who tried to use it. Request permission to relocate to Landing Zone Beta and see if they want to play too. Permission granted, Sergeant. Try not to have too much fun. Choi Min reporting. Dropships 4 through 7 have been convinced to land permanently. I am now conducting ground operations with improvised equipment. The aliens seem confused about why I keep hitting their armor with farming tools. Lieutenant Park Saul looked at the tactical display. which showed Veltharian forces scattered across the colony, many of them cut off from their landing zones, most of them reporting that human resistance was not following expected patterns. Captain, I don't understand what's happening out there. According to standard military doctrine, we should have been overwhelmed in the first hour. Kim Day smiled, listening to another report from Private Kim Sun about how she had turned the water treatment plant into what she called a very unfriendly place for visitors. Park Sol, you're thinking like a normal military unit. The Veltharians prepared to fight normal soldiers using normal tactics with normal equipment. But we're not normal soldiers. What are we then? We're the people who get told something is impossible and decide to prove everyone wrong. We're farmers, miners, and engineers who got drafted into the military and never learned that there were rules about how wars were supposed to be fought. Another communication came through from Corporal Choi Min. Captain, the aliens are requesting reinforcements from their ships in orbit. I think they're having trouble understanding why we keep attacking them from inside grain silos. Kim Day activated the general communication channel that reached all his soldiers throughout the colony. All Honey Badger personnel, this is your captain speaking. The aliens are confused because we're not fighting the way they expected. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Show them that humans don't just refuse to surrender. We refuse to lose even when losing makes perfect sense. From orbit, Commander Kethmar watched his tactical displays with growing bewilderment. His ground forces were reporting contact with human resistance, but the reports made no sense. Humans attacking with farming equipment, explosions that came from agricultural supplies, soldiers who appeared from sewage systems and grain storage facilities. Status report, he demanded from his tactical officer. Sir, our ground forces have encountered unexpected resistance. The humans are not fighting according to any known military doctrine. They appear to be using civilian infrastructure as weapons platforms and agricultural supplies as military hardware. Kethmar stared at the display. In 47 previous conquests, no species had ever responded to Veltharian superiority with such complete disregard for military logic. How many casualties? Significant, sir. The humans are attacking from positions our tactical computers classified as non-threatening. They are using weapons that our intelligence reports did not identify as weapons. On the surface of New Busan, the Honey Badger Division continued their unconventional defense, proving once again that the most dangerous human was not the one with the biggest gun, but the one who refused to admit they were beaten. The real battle was just beginning. 3 hours into what should have been a simple planetary conquest. Commander. Kethmar found himself staring at battle reports that made no sense according to everything the Veltharian military had learned about warfare over the past 1,000 years. His ground forces had superior numbers, advanced technology, and overwhelming firepower. They should have secured the human colony within the first hour. Instead, they were scattered across the settlement, cut off from their landing zones and under constant attack from enemies who appeared to be making up tactics as they went along. Sir, reported his communications officer, Squad Leader Vexthal is requesting immediate evacuation from the grain storage district. He says the humans have turned the entire area into what he describes as a maze of death. Kethmar activated the tactical display, which showed the positions of his forces throughout the colony. Red indicators marked areas where his soldiers had encountered resistance. There were red indicators everywhere. How is this possible? We are fighting farmers and shopkeepers with military surplus equipment. What Kethmar did not understand was that Corporal Choi Min had spent the last 2 hours demonstrating why the Honey Badger Division had earned its reputation as the most stubborn military unit in human space. Choi Min was currently holding off an entire Veltharian platoon from inside the colony's main storage complex, using nothing but a broken mining laser, a collection of farming tools, and what his commanding officers had always described as a complete inability to recognize when he was outmatched. The storage complex was a maze of grain silos, equipment storage areas, and maintenance tunnels that Choi Min had been exploring since arriving at New Busan 6 months ago. He knew every hiding spot, every shortcut, and every structural weakness in the entire facility. The Veltharian soldiers had energy shields that could stop bullets, plasma weapons that could cut through steel, and tactical training that had proven effective against 47 different species. What they did not have was experience fighting someone who responded to overwhelming odds by getting closer and angrier. "Come on then," Choi Min called out from somewhere inside the maze of storage containers. "I've got all day and nothing better to do." The Veltharian soldiers advanced carefully, their sensors scanning for heat signatures, their weapons ready to engage any target that appeared. They had been trained to fight in urban environments, underground facilities, even in zero gravity. None of their training had prepared them for an opponent who kept moving, through ventilation shafts and popping, out of grain storage bins to attack them with improvised weapons. A plasma bolt scorched the air where Choi Min had been standing a moment before. He had already moved to a new position, dragging his broken mining laser behind him like a loyal but temperamental pet. "You know what your problem is?" he called out, setting up his next ambush position behind a container of agricultural equipment. "You think too much. All that advanced technology, all that tactical training, all those sensors and computers telling you what to do, must be exhausting." He triggered his mining laser, which responded by making a sound like a broken air conditioner, and firing a beam that was roughly the right color, but completely the wrong intensity. The beam cut through a support pillar, which caused a collection of farming equipment to cascade down on the advancing alien soldiers. The Veltharians scrambled for cover, their formation broken, their advance halted by what was essentially a booby trap made from spare parts and gravity. "See? That's the difference between us," Choi Min continued, moving to his next position. "You have all this sophisticated equipment that tells you the proper way to do things. I have a laser that shouldn't work, held together with tape and bad language, and I use it to drop farming equipment on people. Guess which one is more effective right now?" Meanwhile, Private Kim Sun was demonstrating similar principles at the colony's water treatment facility, which she had transformed into what the Veltharian tactical computers were describing as a hostile environment anomaly. Kim Sun had discovered that the facility's chemical storage systems, when creatively repurposed, could produce atmospheric conditions that were extremely unpleasant for visiting aliens. She had also figured out how to use the facility's pumping systems to create what she called mobile chemical hazards. 3 Veltharian soldiers approached the treatment plant, confident that their environmental suits would protect them from any hazards a simple water facility might contain. They were technically correct, but Kim Sun had never been interested in technical correctness. "Welcome to the New Busan Water Treatment Facility," she announced over the facility's public address system. "Please be aware that we are currently experiencing technical difficulties with our chemical containment systems." She activated the emergency release valves, which sent clouds of chlorinated water mixed with industrial cleaning compounds rolling across the approach to the facility. The Veltharian soldiers' suits protected them from the chemicals, but their sensors were overwhelmed by the toxic fog. "Also," Kim Sun continued cheerfully, "please be advised that our automated security systems may not function properly in the current atmospheric conditions." The automated security systems consisted of sprinkler heads that Kim Sun had loaded with a mixture of industrial acid and agricultural pest control chemicals. When the alien soldiers stumbled into the treatment facility, temporarily blinded by the chemical fog, they walked directly into Kim Sun's improvised chemical warfare system. Their armor protected them from serious injury, but their equipment began malfunctioning as the corrosive mixture ate through external sensors and communication arrays. "Sorry about the inconvenience," Kim Sun called out from her position in the facility's control room. "We're experiencing higher than normal visitor volume today." Back in the command center, Captain Kim Dae was coordinating the defense with the casual competence of someone who had spent years fighting impossible battles and winning through sheer refusal to lose. Lieutenant Park, Saul monitored the communication channels, listening to reports from soldiers throughout the colony. The reports would have sounded like complete chaos to any conventional military analyst. But Kim Dae nodded with satisfaction as each update came through. "Captain, I'm getting reports that our people are engaging enemy forces at 17 different locations simultaneously. According to standard tactical doctrine, we should consolidate our forces and establish defensive perimeters." Kim Dae looked at the tactical display, which showed honey badger personnel scattered across the entire colony, each one apparently conducting their own private war against vastly superior forces. "Park Saul, what do you think would happen if we tried to consolidate our forces? We would present a concentrated target for alien orbital bombardment and probably be eliminated within minutes." "Exactly. And what happens when we scatter our forces and let everyone fight their own battles? Parksall studied the display, watching as red indicators showed alien forces being engaged from multiple directions by opponents who seemed to be everywhere at once. The aliens can't predict where we'll attack next because we don't know where we'll attack. That's part of it. But there's something else. Look at the enemy movement patterns. Parksall examined the Veltharian positions, noting how their forces had become fragmented, isolated, and unable to support each other effectively. They're reacting to us instead of executing their battle plan. Better than that, they're trying to fight a conventional military engagement against opponents who have never read the manual on conventional military engagements. Every time they adapt to one of our tactics, we do something completely different because we were making it up anyway. A new communication came through from Sergeant Lee Nari, who had moved to the colony's industrial district and was apparently conducting what she described as aggressive recycling operations. Captain, I've convinced the aliens that the recycling plant is more dangerous than they initially calculated. They're requesting support from their orbital units. How did you convince them of that, Sergeant? I showed them what happens when you use industrial recycling equipment to process alien dropships. Turns out they recycle very efficiently. Kim Day smiled, the same expression he wore when people told him something was impossible, and he began planning how to prove them wrong. Keep up the good work, Sergeant. Show them that humans don't just recycle their waste products. We recycle our enemy's equipment too. From orbit, Commander Kethmar watched his forces struggle against an opponent that refused to behave according to any known military principles. His soldiers were brave, well-trained, and equipped with technology that should have guaranteed victory. But they were fighting an enemy that responded to superior firepower by attacking with farming equipment, met advanced tactics with complete improvisation, and treated overwhelming odds as a personal challenge rather than a reason for surrender. For the first time in his military career, Kethmar began to wonder if he had chosen the wrong planet to invade. 5 hours after the invasion began, Commander Kethmar made a decision that would have shocked his military academy instructors. He requested a ceasefire with the human defenders of New Busan colony. The request came not from a position of strength, but from a growing realization that his forces were fighting an enemy that operated outside every known principle of military science. His soldiers were brave, disciplined, and equipped with superior technology. They were also scattered, confused, and under constant attack from opponents who seemed to treat impossible odds as a form of entertainment. The ceasefire negotiations took place in the colony's administrative building, which had somehow remained intact despite being located in the middle of what the Veltharians were beginning to realize was less a conventional battle and more a sustained demonstration of human stubbornness. Commander Kethmar entered the building expecting to meet with military strategists, government officials, perhaps diplomatic personnel who understood the proper protocols for planetary surrender. Instead, he found himself facing Captain Kim Day, who was sitting calmly at a simple wooden table, cleaning dirt from under his fingernails with a combat knife. The human captain looked exactly like what he was, a career soldier who had spent years fighting battles that other people considered unwinnable. His uniform was practical rather than ceremonial. His equipment was well maintained but clearly well used, and his expression was that of someone who found the current situation mildly interesting, but not particularly surprising. Commander Kethmar, Kim Day said politely, not looking up from his fingernails. I understand you wanted to discuss terms. Kethmar had conducted surrender negotiations with 47 different species across 12 sectors of the galaxy. He had developed a standard approach that combined overwhelming evidence of Veltharian superiority with offers of reasonable treatment for those who submitted peacefully. Captain Kim Day, your position is hopeless. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off from all support. My forces control the orbital space around your planet, and we possess the technological capability to eliminate your entire colony from space. Surrender now, and the Galactic Council will show mercy to your people. Kim Day finally looked up from his knife, his expression unchanged. Through the windows of the administrative building, Veltharian soldiers were visible taking defensive positions while human defenders moved with the casual confidence of people who were winning a fight that everyone agreed they should be losing. Mercy for what? We're winning. This was the moment when Kethmar began to understand that he was dealing with a fundamentally different kind of opponent. Every other species he had conquered had eventually recognized the mathematical impossibility of their situation and negotiated the best terms they could manage. The humans seemed genuinely confused by the concept that they were supposed to lose. "Captain, you have lost more than half your defensive positions. My forces have superior numbers, advanced technology, and orbital support. How can you possibly claim to be winning?" Kim Day smiled, the same expression he had worn when 12 alien warships first appeared in the sky above New Busan. "Commander, winning and losing are about more than numbers and technology. My people are still fighting. Your people are asking for a ceasefire. That tells me everything I need to know about who's winning." Sergeant Lee Nari chose that moment to stick her head through the administrative building's main door. She was covered in soot, carrying what appeared to be a piece of alien equipment, and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had just solved an interesting technical problem. "Captain, we've figured out how the alien landing craft work. Should we liberate a few more of them?" Kim Day raised an eyebrow. "How many have you liberated so far?" 6 dropships and what I think is a command vehicle. Turns out they're not much harder to steal than regular vehicles once you understand that the security systems are designed to keep out sophisticated thieves, not people who just hit things with tools until they work. Commander Kethmar stared at the human sergeant. In his military experience, soldiers did not casually discuss stealing enemy vehicles during formal negotiations. They certainly did not discuss attacking military spacecraft with improvised tools. "Sergeant, you cannot seriously be considering attacking Class 7 battlecruisers with infantry weapons." Lee Nari looked genuinely confused by the question. "Why not? They're just floating up there, not doing anything particularly useful. Besides, we're not planning to attack them with infantry weapons." "What are you planning to attack them with?" "Their own dropships. We figured if their technology is so advanced it should work pretty well against other examples of their technology." Kethmar turned back to Captain Kim Day, hoping to find a more reasonable negotiating partner. "Captain, surely you understand that your sergeant's plan is tactically impossible?" Kim Day shrugged. "Commander, Lee Nari once captured an entire pirate base using nothing but mining charges and a broken cargo hauler. If she says we can steal your spaceships and use them to attack your other spaceships, I'm inclined to believe her." Another voice came from outside the building. Corporal Choi Min was apparently having a conversation with someone about the proper way to disable alien combat armor. "You see, the problem with your suits is that they're designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles. They're not designed to stop someone hitting them repeatedly with a sledgehammer while reciting ancient Korean poetry." Kethmar could see through the window as Choi Min demonstrated his point to a group of captured Veltharian soldiers. The human corporal was indeed carrying a sledgehammer, and the alien soldiers were indeed looking at their damaged armor with expressions of professional bewilderment. "Captain," Kethmar said, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure, "your soldiers appear to be treating this engagement as some form of recreational activity." "Commander, my soldiers are members of the Honey Badger Division. We don't treat anything as recreational activity. We just happen to enjoy our work." Private Kim Sun appeared in the doorway, carrying a container that was making ominous bubbling sounds. "Captain, I've finished converting the water treatment facility into a mobile chemical warfare laboratory. Should I begin deployment of atmospheric modification systems in the areas where the aliens are trying to establish defensive positions?" Kim Day nodded approvingly. "Proceed with atmospheric modification, Private. Try to make it educational for our visitors." Kim Sun saluted and disappeared, leaving behind only the faint smell of industrial chemicals and the sound of something that was definitely not supposed to be making that particular bubbling noise. "Commander," Kim Day continued, turning back to Kethmar, "I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of this engagement. You seem to believe this is a conventional military operation, where superior technology and numbers will inevitably lead to victory." "That is correct. It is the basis of all successful military strategy. But here's what you don't understand about the Honey Badger Division. We're not a conventional military unit. We're the soldiers who get assigned to hopeless missions because we're too stubborn to recognize when something is hopeless." Lieutenant Park Saul entered the building, carrying a communication tablet and wearing the expression of someone who had been monitoring impossible things happening on a regular basis. "Captain, we're receiving reports from all defensive positions. The aliens are requesting additional reinforcements from their orbital units. How many additional reinforcements? All of them, sir. Apparently, our people have convinced them that New Busan colony is significantly more dangerous than their initial intelligence reports indicated. Kim Dae looked across the table at Commander Kethmar, who was beginning to realize that his 48th planetary conquest was not proceeding according to established patterns. Commander, I think your soldiers are starting to understand what we've been trying to tell you. This is New Busan colony, defended by the Honey Badger Division. We don't surrender, we don't retreat, and we don't lose. We just keep fighting until the other side gets tired of fighting us. And if we bring more forces, Kim Dae smiled, checking his watch as if alien invasions were scheduled appointments that he needed to fit into his daily routine. Then we'll have more practice targets. Commander, we're the people who looked at the most dangerous animals on Earth and decided to make them into pets. We're the species that invented extreme sports because regular sports weren't challenging enough. And we're the military unit that responds to overwhelming odds by asking if that's the best you can do. Outside, the sounds of continuing conflict suggested that the ceasefire was being interpreted more as a brief pause in hostilities than an actual end to combat operations. So please, Commander Kethmar, feel free to bring more ships, more soldiers, more advanced technology. We'll show you why the honey badger is the only animal that other animals are afraid to fight, and why the Honey Badger Division has never lost a defensive engagement. Never lost? Never lost. We've had tactical withdrawals, strategic repositioning, and administrative relocations, but we've never lost because we've never stopped fighting. The negotiations continued, but Commander Kethmar was beginning to suspect that he was not negotiating with people who understood the concept of surrender. The ceasefire lasted exactly 37 minutes before Private Jin decided that it was taking too long and that someone should probably do something about the alien spaceship that was just sitting there in orbit, apparently not being used for anything important. Jin had joined the Honey Badger Division after being discharged from 3 different military academies for what her instructors had described as a complete inability to distinguish between reasonable risk and suicidal stupidity. The Honey Badgers had recognized this as a valuable skill set. During the negotiations in the administrative building, Jin had been conducting what she called reconnaissance operations in the area where the Veltharian dropships had landed. Reconnaissance in this case meant figuring out how alien spacecraft worked and whether they were as difficult to steal as they looked. The answer, she discovered, was that they were not difficult to steal at all, provided you approach the problem with sufficient creativity and a complete disregard for personal safety. Veltharian security systems were designed to prevent sophisticated infiltration attempts by trained military specialists using advanced technology. They were not designed to stop someone who simply walked up to a spaceship, hit the access panel with a wrench until it opened, and then climbed inside to see what all the buttons did. Jin was currently sitting in the pilot's seat of a Veltharian command dropship, surrounded by alien controls that made interesting sounds when she pressed them. She had been experimenting with the various systems for the past 20 minutes and had discovered that the ship's computer spoke perfectly understandable Korean once she convinced it that she was an authorized user. The convincing had involved hitting the authentication system with her wrench until it stopped asking for passwords and started showing her helpful instruction videos. Well, that was easier than expected, she said to herself, watching a tutorial about orbital navigation procedures. These aliens really need better security training. Back in the administrative building, the negotiations between Captain Kim Dae and Commander Kethmar were interrupted by an urgent communication from the Veltharian flagship. "Commander," came the voice of Kethmar's tactical officer, "we are detecting unauthorized access to Dropship 7. Someone appears to be activating its systems." Kethmar looked at Captain Kim Dae, who maintained his expression of polite interest. "Captain, are your soldiers attempting to access our vehicles during a ceasefire?" "Commander, my soldiers are always attempting to access interesting technology. It's one of their most endearing qualities. This is a violation of ceasefire protocols." Kim Dae shrugged. "You might want to mention that to Private Jin. Although I should warn you, she's not particularly good at following protocols. It's why she's here instead of at a regular military posting." The communication from orbit continued with increasing urgency. "Sir, Dropship 7 is now airborne and appears to be heading toward the flagship. The pilot is not responding to standard identification requests. Because the pilot is not one of yours. Kim Dae explained helpfully. Private Yu Jin has probably figured out how your ships work and decided to take one for a test flight. Commander Kethmar activated his personal communicator. All units, this is Commander Kethmar. A stolen dropship is approaching the flagship. Intercept and disable. Kim Dae held up one finger. Commander, I should probably mention that ordering your people to shoot at Yu Jin is likely to make her angry. And when Honey Badger Division personnel get angry, they tend to do increasingly creative things. High above the colony, Private Yu Jin was having what she would later describe as the most educational day of her military career. The Veltharian dropship responded to her controls with precision and power that far exceeded anything in the human arsenal. It also came equipped with weapon systems that were apparently designed for someone with a more conventional approach to combat than Yu Jin possessed. Let's see what this does, she said, activating what the instruction manual described as defensive countermeasures. The defensive countermeasures turned out to be a sophisticated electronic warfare system that could disable the targeting computers of nearby spacecraft. When Yu Jin activated the system while approaching the Veltharian flagship, every ship in the immediate area suddenly found their weapons unable to lock onto targets. Oh, that's useful, Yu Jin observed, watching the alien fighters trying unsuccessfully to get a target lock on her stolen dropship. I wonder what this button does. The button activated the dropship's emergency beacon, which sent a signal to every Veltharian vessel in the system indicating that the ship was in distress and required immediate assistance. The result was that half the alien fleet suddenly changed course to rescue Private Yu Jin from whatever emergency they assumed she was experiencing, while the other half tried to intercept her before she could reach the flagship. The resulting confusion in orbital space was visible from the surface as alien ships moved in seemingly random patterns, their formations disrupted, their command structure overwhelmed by conflicting orders and impossible tactical situations. On the ground, Corporal Choi Min was taking advantage of the extended ceasefire to conduct what he called cultural exchange activities with the captured Veltharian soldiers. Cultural exchange, in his case, meant demonstrating human approaches to problem solving. You see, he explained to a group of alien prisoners, your problem is that you think too much about efficiency and tactical optimization. Watch this. Choi Min picked up his broken mining laser, which was still held together with maintenance tape and producing the wrong color beam at irregular intervals. He pointed it at a piece of alien equipment that the Veltharians had assured him was completely indestructible. Now, according to your specifications, this laser doesn't have enough power to damage your equipment. But you're forgetting something important. He activated the laser, which made its usual sound of mechanical distress, and fired a beam that was roughly the right intensity but completely the wrong frequency. The alien equipment, which had been designed to withstand specific types of energy weapons, was not prepared for a laser that worked incorrectly. The equipment sparked, smoked, and shut down completely. The something important, Choi Min continued, is that humans specialize in making things work that aren't supposed to work. We've been doing it for thousands of years. Meanwhile, Sergeant Lee Nari was using the ceasefire to conduct advanced engineering seminars for the colonists, teaching them how to convert civilian infrastructure into military assets. The key to effective improvisation, she explained to a group of farmers who were learning how to weaponize agricultural equipment, is to remember that everything is a weapon if you use it wrong enough. She demonstrated by showing them how to convert a grain harvester into a mobile artillery platform, a process that involved considerable creativity and a complete disregard for the manufacturer's warranty. Now, when the ceasefire ends, these aliens are going to expect us to fight like a conventional military force. Instead, we're going to fight like angry farmers with a complete understanding of agricultural chemistry and no respect for proper safety procedures. Back in orbit, Private Yu Jin had discovered that the Veltharian flagship was equipped with a docking bay that was currently unguarded because everyone aboard the ship was trying to figure out how to respond to a stolen dropship that was broadcasting emergency signals while approaching their position with hostile intent. Well, she said, steering the dropship toward the docking bay, they did leave the door open. It would be rude not to visit. The tactical officer aboard the flagship watched in horror as the stolen dropship landed in their main docking bay. Sir, the infiltrator has successfully boarded our vessel. Commander Kethmar still sitting across from Captain Kim Day in the colony's administrative building, closed his eyes and tried to imagine how he would explain this situation to his superiors. "Captain, your soldier has just committed an act of piracy against a Class 7 battlecruiser during a ceasefire negotiation." Kim Day smiled. "Commander, my soldier has just demonstrated why the Honey Badger Division never loses. When conventional tactics fail, we try unconventional tactics. When unconventional tactics fail, we try impossible tactics. And when impossible tactics fail, we try things that are so crazy they shouldn't work at all. And if those fail, then we try them again but angrier." From the flagship's internal communications, reports began filtering down about a single human soldier who had somehow penetrated the ship's security and was currently in the entertainment section, apparently trying to achieve high scores on Veltharian recreational systems. "Sir," came the increasingly desperate voice of the ship's security chief, "the infiltrator has bypassed our weapons storage, ignored our navigation computers, and is currently in Recreation Bay 7 playing our simulation games. She appears to be winning." Commander Kethmar looked across the table at Captain Kim Day, who was listening to the reports with the satisfied expression of someone whose expectations were being met exactly. "Commander," Kim Day said, "I think this demonstrates the fundamental difference between your approach to warfare and ours. Your people try to accomplish military objectives through superior technology and tactical coordination. Our people try to accomplish military objectives by doing things that are so unexpected that the enemy stops functioning properly." The sound of continuing chaos from both orbit and the surrounding colony suggested that the Honey Badger Division's approach was working exactly as intended. 8 hours after the invasion of New Busan Colony began, Commander Kethamar found himself in the unprecedented position of requesting immediate withdrawal from what should have been a routine planetary conquest. The request came not from military defeat in any conventional sense, but from the growing realization that his forces were fighting an enemy that operated according to principles that violated every known law of military science, common sense, and apparently physics. Private Yu Jin had spent the last 2 hours aboard his flagship, not attempting sabotage or intelligence gathering, but apparently treating the most advanced warship in the Veltharian fleet as her personal entertainment center. She had achieved high scores on every recreational system aboard the ship, figured out how to order food from the automated kitchen, and was currently conducting what she described as a comprehensive evaluation of alien television programming. "Sir," reported his increasingly exhausted security chief, "the human infiltrator has now accessed our educational databases and is watching instructional videos about Veltharian history. She appears to be taking notes." Commander Kethmar had led successful military operations across 12 sectors of the galaxy. He had conquered 47 different worlds using combinations of superior technology, tactical coordination, and overwhelming force. None of his training had prepared him for an opponent who responded to invasion by stealing his spaceships and using them to conduct unauthorized cultural research. On the surface of New Busan, the situation was equally impossible to explain in conventional military terms. His ground forces had superior numbers, advanced weapons, and tactical advantages that should have guaranteed victory within hours. Instead, they were scattered, demoralized, and under constant attack from opponents who seemed to view impossible odds as an interesting challenge rather than a reason for retreat. Sergeant Lee Nari had been awake for 36 consecutive hours, had consumed nothing but military rations and coffee for 3 days, and was operating on what she cheerfully described as spite and caffeine. She was also currently leading a frontal assault on a heavily fortified Veltharian position using a combination of explosive devices made from household chemicals and what appeared to be an antique farming implement that she had somehow converted into a siege weapon. The Veltharian soldiers defending the position had energy shields, plasma weapons, and tactical training that emphasized defensive coordination and mutual support. They also had no idea how to respond to someone who attacked fortified positions by throwing homemade explosives while reciting what sounded like ancient agricultural poetry. Or, "The harvest that feeds the people," Linari called out, hurling another improvised chemical device over the alien barricades, "and the land that feeds the harvest." The explosion that followed was not sophisticated, not precise, and certainly not regulation military equipment. It was also completely effective at convincing the Veltharian defenders that their position was no longer defensible. Meanwhile, Corporal Choi Min was demonstrating the Honey Badger Division's approach to equipment maintenance by continuing to use the same broken mining laser that should have been decommissioned months ago. The weapon was held together with maintenance tape, spare parts cannibalized from other equipment, and what military engineers had described as a complete violation of safety protocols. It was also responsible for more enemy casualties than any other single weapon in the human arsenal, mostly because Choi Min had decided that if the laser was going to malfunction anyway, he might as well use it in ways that violated every operational guideline ever written. The beautiful thing about broken equipment, he explained to a group of captured Veltharian soldiers, is that it stops working the way it's supposed to work and starts working the way you need it to work, he demonstrated by pointing the mining laser at a piece of alien fortification that the Veltharians had assured him was completely indestructible. The laser responded by making its usual sound of mechanical distress and firing a beam that was the wrong color, wrong intensity, and wrong frequency. The supposedly indestructible fortification melted. See, if this laser worked properly, it would fire a standard industrial cutting beam that your shields could handle. But since it's broken, it fires something that your technology was never designed to deal with. The Veltharian soldiers stared at their melted fortification with expressions of professional bewilderment. Back in the administrative building, Captain Kim Dae was concluding his negotiations with Commander Kethmar with the same calm professionalism he had maintained throughout the entire engagement. Commander, I believe you mentioned something about withdrawal of your forces. Kethmar looked at the reports from his scattered ground units, his confused orbital fleet, and his flagship, which was apparently hosting an unauthorized cultural exchange program conducted by a single human soldier with no military objectives beyond satisfying her curiosity about alien entertainment systems. Captain Kim Dae, I am formally requesting that the Veltharian Imperial Navy be permitted to withdraw from this system without further interference from your forces. Kim Dae raised an eyebrow. Commander, are you surrendering? I am conducting a strategic withdrawal from an untenable tactical situation, which sounds like surrendering with extra words. Lieutenant Park Saul looked up from his communication station, where he had been monitoring reports from Honey Badger personnel throughout the colony. Captain, we're receiving reports from all positions. The aliens are requesting permission to return to their ships. Are they surrendering or withdrawing? They're using the word withdrawal, but they're doing it very quickly and without taking most of their equipment. Kim Dae smiled, the same expression he had worn when 12 alien warships first appeared over New Busan. That sounds like surrendering to me. Commander Kethmar stood up from the negotiating table, his dignity intact but his confidence in Veltharian military superiority significantly damaged. Captain, your forces have conducted this engagement in a manner that violates every established principle of military science. Your soldiers attack when they should retreat, defend positions that have no tactical value, and use equipment in ways that should be impossible. Commander, my soldiers are members of the Honey Badger Division. We don't follow established principles of military science because established principles assume that both sides are trying to fight the same kind of war. What kind of war are you fighting? Kim Dae looked out the window at the bustling activity of colonists and soldiers working together to clean up the debris from 8 hours of unconventional warfare. His people were already beginning repairs, already planning improvements, already discussing what they had learned from fighting technologically superior opponents. We're fighting the kind of war where we don't lose because we don't know how to stop fighting. Commander, you came here expecting to conquer a farming colony defended by primitive humans with inferior technology. Instead, you found a farming colony defended by people who respond to impossible odds by getting creative. Private Kim's son appeared in the doorway, no longer carrying containers of dangerous chemicals, but instead holding what appeared to be a report, written on recycled paper. Captain, I've finished converting the water treatment facility back to normal operations. Also, I wrote up a technical report on how to weaponize civilian infrastructure in case we need to do this again. Kim Dae accepted the report with a nod of approval. Excellent work, Private. File that under Advanced Agricultural Techniques. Commander Kethmar watched this exchange with the expression of someone who was beginning to understand that he had never been fighting a conventional military force at all. Captain, Do your soldiers always treat military engagements as learning experiences? Commander, my soldiers treat everything as learning experiences. It's how we stay ahead of enemies with superior technology. You study the proper way to do things. We study every possible way to do things, including the ways that shouldn't work but somehow do. The final reports began coming in from across the colony as Veltharian forces completed their withdrawal to orbital positions. The reports painted a picture of a battle that would be studied in military academies across human space for decades, not because of its strategic brilliance, but because of its complete disregard for strategic logic. Sergeant Lee Nari had held a position against overwhelming odds using explosives made from farming supplies. Corporal Choi Min had disabled enemy equipment with tools that shouldn't have functioned. Private Kim Sun had turned civilian infrastructure into military assets. Private Yu Jin had conducted unauthorized reconnaissance of enemy capital ships by pretending to be interested in their entertainment systems. Sir, Lieutenant Park Saul reported, all Veltharian ground forces have returned to their ships. We're detecting preparations for departure from orbital positions. Kim Dae turned back to Commander Kethmar, who was preparing to leave the administrative building and return to his flagship, where he would have to explain to his crew why a single human soldier was still aboard and apparently unwilling to leave, until she finished watching what she described as a very interesting documentary about Veltharian agricultural practices. Commander, before you go, I want you to understand something important. This wasn't about superior tactics or better technology. This was about the difference between soldiers who fight to win and soldiers who fight because they don't know how to lose. And what is that difference? Soldiers who fight to win will eventually encounter a situation where winning is impossible, and they will surrender. Soldiers who fight because they don't know how to lose will keep fighting until the other side gets tired of fighting them. Commander Kethmar looked around the colony one final time, noting the damage from 8 hours of impossible warfare, the debris from destroyed alien equipment, and the colonists who were already rebuilding with the kind of determined optimism that seemed to characterize human responses to almost everything. Captain Kim Dae, I will be filing a report with Galactic Council Military Command, recommending that human-occupied systems be classified as tactically inadvisable for standard conquest operations. What classification will you recommend? Defended by entities that do not conform to known principles of military engagement. Recommend avoiding contact until comprehensive countermeasures can be developed. Kim Dae smiled. Commander, I don't think any countermeasures will help. You can't develop tactics against opponents who make up new tactics every time they encounter a problem. As the Veltharian fleet departed New Busan system, Private Yu Jin finally agreed to return to the surface, but only after copying several educational videos about alien technology and leaving behind a handwritten note thanking the crew for their hospitality and suggesting improvements to their recreational facilities. The colony of New Busan returned to its normal routine of farming, building and living with the quiet satisfaction of people who had been invaded by the most advanced military force in the galaxy and had responded by making them leave through the simple expedient of refusing to lose. Captain Kim Dae filed his after-action report using the standard military format, though he suspected that military historians would have difficulty categorizing an engagement where victory had been achieved through the tactical application of agricultural chemistry, broken equipment, and sheer bloody-minded determination. 6 months later, the Honey Badger Division received new orders for their next assignment. The orders came with a note from High Command. Congratulations on your successful defense of New Busan Colony. Word of your engagement with Veltharian forces has spread throughout known space. We are pleased to inform you that invasion attempts against human colonies have decreased by 73%. System-wide, Lieutenant Park Saul read the orders and looked at Captain Kim Dae with a mixture of pride and concern. Sir, our next assignment is defending a mining colony in the Outer Rim. Intelligence reports indicate possible hostile contact with 3 different alien species. Kim Dae smiled, checking his sidearm and looking out at his soldiers, who were already making preparations for their next impossible mission. Park Saul, do you know what the best thing about fighting 3 different alien species is? No, sir. 3 times as many opportunities to show them why humans don't surrender. And so the Honey Badger Division prepared for their next deployment, carrying with them the reputation that had preceded them across 3 sectors: defenders of the impossible, masters of the inadvisable, and the military unit that responded to overwhelming odds by asking if that was the best the enemy could do. Because that's what humans do. They don't give up. They especially don't give up when someone tells them they should.